It's spring and almost all the snow is gone. I really like this time of the year because a lot of the flowers are really colorful. And next to that brown ground, they just stand up so nice. For me, it's important to get some really early blooms. I want to see color as soon as the snow melts. It's April 15th in my Zone 5 garden, and I went out in the garden and took pictures of all the things that are blooming. In this video, I'm going to quickly go through the highlights of the things I really like for early spring bloomers. Let's go see some color. Let's start with some early bloomers. These are the beautiful snowdrops. Normally at this time of year, they're in their prime, but we just went through a week of fairly warm weather, and the flowers on most of my snowdrops are finished now. This clump happens to be sitting in a very shady area on the north side of the house, and it's survived the heat. The nice thing about snowdrops is that they come out very early. A lot of the pollinators like them, and you can plant them under trees. The leaves come out early. They get enough sun before the tree leaves come out, and so they can be planted in quite shady areas and they do quite well. And by midsummer they go underground. Another favorite one is the winter aconites. It's probably the first flower that comes out in my garden. And again, they're pretty much finished by this time of the year. They will make seeds, and the seeds drop right under the parent plants. It's a good idea to come along every few years and dig up the plants. Take out the bigger bulbs and move them to other parts of your garden and replant the smaller bulb. Another early flowering bulb is the iris reticulata, and they come in at least a half a dozen different colors. They're great plants. They don't spread. They come out early along with the snowdrops, and the foliage for this bulb looks just like grass, so it doesn't really bother you in the garden. Here's another great little plant. It does spread around a little bit, but not too bad. This is Puschkinia. Tiny little thing. By midsummer, it's underground and you don't even see it. This is the common blue Chionodoxa. Again, early flowering, then it goes underground. But if you're getting this plant, I would suggest getting this one here. This one is called Pink Giant. The flowers are a little larger than the blue one, and the color is really spectacular in the garden. I find this one doesn't spread as much as the blue one. Of course, Scilla is a great plant. It does spread around quite a bit. It can be lovely in a lawn. Let's go over to my rock garden and see some of the early bloomers there. One of my favorite groups of plants are the Drabas, and there's quite a few different species, and the yellow Drabas all kind of look the same. They flower early and they make these little clumps of green growths, very similar to a hen and check, which you can actually see in this picture, but they're much smaller than that. So they make nice clumps, which is perfect for a rock garden. Drabas can also come in white varieties. The plant structure of the white varieties isn't quite as nice. It's not a neat looking plant, but the flowers are quite interesting. You might recognize this as heather, but you would be wrong. Heather is an alpine plant that grows in acidic soil, and it just won't do well in my garden. Our soil is a pH of 7.4, but a number of years ago I picked up this Erica, and Ericas and heathers look very similar. The flowers are also similar, but Ericas can grow in a more alkaline soil, and so now I have a couple different Ericas that are doing quite well in my garden, and these things are just covered with bees and flies and insects. Daffodils are great plants. When you buy daffodils, pick them based on the time of year they flower. There's early, mid-season, and late-season ones, and if you have a mixture of those, you'll have daffodils in your garden for a very long period of time. Probably the first one that will open up is this one here. It's called tete. It's a smaller yellow daffodil. It's a really nice plant, and this one works very well in shady conditions. Because it comes up so early, it's able to capture enough sunlight to develop next year's bulbs and flower well in a shady condition. Here's a double variety called campernelle. It's also an early plant and stays quite small, and this would make a great addition to a rock garden. The Helleborus are becoming really popular. Here's a nice pink spotted one that's just starting to open. In our Zone 5 garden, the leaves of these get kind of ratty, and I normally cut these off this time of year. On this plant, the leaves are still green, so I might leave it for a week or two, but eventually they will go brown. And once the flowers are finished, new leaves will come from inside the crown of the plant. So you might as well cut this old stuff off. This is a named cultivar called Confetti cake. It's a semi-double with lots of spotting. When you buy Helleborus, it's a good idea to buy them with the flower on it so you can see what they look like. Try to find ones where the flowers are more upright facing, and then pick the colors that you like. Probably my favorite Hellebore is this one here called the Stinking Hellebore. It's flowering now, but we don't really grow it for the flowers. They're kind of a ugly chartreuse green color, but I grow it for the leaves. It's evergreen in zone 5 all year long, makes a great display. Is really nice if you put this plant next to large leaf plants like the hostas, and that dark blue-green color sets them off so nicely. It does spread around a little bit, but not too bad. You just dig up the extras and give them to friends. Now I found that this plant is not long lived. So after about 3 or 4 years it does die out, but by then it has baby plants growing around the mother plant, so you'll never lose it. Hepaticas are native to our woodlands here. They're a very tiny, delicate little plant. They start coming out around this time and will be doing their best in another couple weeks. They like a semi-sunny area. They grow under trees and shrubs, so they're a great plant to tuck away. Most of them come in pinks, whites, and some blues. This is Bloodroot. It's a weird little plant. Again, it's native in Ontario. It's a woodland plant, comes up early, but the flowers don't last very long. If we have good weather, they'll be out for maybe a week, more like 5 days. But if they're out like this and it rains, they're gone. They're so beautiful, but last such a short period of time. The good thing about this plant is that the leaves are really interesting. So even without the flowers, this is a worthwhile plant to grow. I love Anemone blanda, but they do seed around a little bit. So put them in a spot where you really don't care about them spreading. They come in beautiful pinks, blues, and whites. Now you might think it's a bit early for the pasque flower to come out, but this is a particular species variety that blooms ahead of the regular variety, and it's already out. This is called Pulsatilla styriaca. It's a beautiful plant, great for a rock garden. Put it in full sun and it'll be there for a very long time. So now let's look at a couple weird plants. I'm going to show you this one. I'm not sure I'd recommend it for you, but it is an interesting plant. This is Scopolia carniolica, and the variety is brevifolia. The regular variety is a reddish color, and this is the yellow version of that. Early bloomer, but once the flowers are done, this is not a spectacular plant. So I grow it mostly because it's just so unusual and really hard to find in the trade. If you have a large garden, add one of these. You'll love it. But in a smaller garden where you want plants that are doing a good display all year season long, this is probably not your best bet. Here's another one of these rarities that's nice to have. It's a tiny, tiny little plant called Erythronium rose queen. Common name is the dogtooth violet. Now we have a native one here in Ontario that has yellow flowers, but that won't flower for several weeks. This one flowers very early. A beautiful pink color, but it's not a very large plant. This flower is about 4 inches above the ground, so it's important to site it well. You wanted it in a rock garden bed and ideally a little higher so that you can easily see the flower. Alright, so we've looked at some bulbs, some perennials, but there are shrubs flowering at this time of the year as well. A really nice one is the cornelian cherry, or Cornus mass. This time of year it gets covered in small yellow flowers. They have a kind of fruity smell that attracts lots of pollinators. Another really interesting one is the witch hazel, Hamamelis, and there are 2 different types here. The native North American one is called Virginiana, and it flowers in the fall. October, November in my zone 5 garden. But they've taken that plant and crossed it with some Asian species and come up with a variety called intermedia. A very common one is Arnold Promise, which has nice yellow flowers as shown here. These will then flower really early. A lot of times this is in flower when there's still snow on the ground. The last shrub I'm going to show you is Daphne mesereum. It has tiny pink red flowers, grows about 5 feet feet tall, although you can prune it and keep it shorter if you want. And then in the fall it will make little red berries. As you can see, there's lots of plants that you can put in your garden for an early flower display. And if you're a gardener like me, you just love that early color after a long winter. Have a look around your garden. If you don't have a lot of things blooming at this time of the year, go through my list here and add some of these plants to your garden. For me, the first flowers of the year are really special. It's spring, and one of the things that people find very confusing is the pruning of clematis. There are different types of clematis, and they have to be pruned differently. So if you have any questions about pruning clematis, watch this video right here.